Today, we talk about the top 5 running backs in our consensus rankings in PPR leagues. It's Adam, Dan, and Dave today on Fantasy Football Today. And all of these players likely to be first-round picks, or at least very close to it. But there are some big names who are not in the consensus top 5. And looking forward to breaking that down. We're also going to have Tara Roberts joining us later as a special guest of the program today. Dan Schneier's back. What's up, Dan?
What's going on, guys? I'm happy to be here. It's been a nice few days. We had a fun mailbag, and now let's talk running backs.
Yes, and Dave Richard is here. We just spoke to Robert Turbin. What an awesome interview with Dave. I had a great time. I don't know how you felt. I had so much fun talking to Robert.
Oh, I had a horrible time. It was totally not insightful. Didn't learn a damn thing. No, Robert was great. You know, it's always fun to talk with former players because they give us a perspective that we just don't have. We didn't play football. I know, Adam, you look like you played football, but, you know, you didn't. And it's good to pick their brains. I thought it was very interesting what Rob had to say about torn ACLs and how he felt like he needed 2 years to come back to his normal self. And that kind of meshes with how it's been for most players.
Yep.
I say most, not all. Adam, you brought up Adrian Peterson. That dude's a freak of nature. Is Breece Hall a freak of nature? Is Javonte Williams a freak of nature? Are they going to be able to come back from their injuries and play like everything's cool? No drop in efficiency? After talking to Robert yesterday, I'm starting to worry a little bit about them.
Well, let's be clear. You were worried about them before talking to Robert Turbin. I mean, it's not like he opened your eyes to something. We know the track record there.
Maybe that's true.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And his top 5 running backs.
Way to bury the guest, Adam.
No, I'm burying Dave. He's, you know, let's not overreact to the comment. It's a very insightful comment from Robert, but let's not act like you weren't there before. But his top 5. We made him give a top 5 running backs on the spot. It was this is just the way he listed them. This was not the way he ranked them. Bijan Robinson, McCaffrey, Ekeler. So that's part of the consensus.
For fantasy, he was doing it or over actual? Okay.
And then he had Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry. He did not. He had some things to say about Jonathan Taylor. Just listen to that show. Listen to that show if you get a chance. It dropped this morning. All right. So here is the consensus top 5 combining Dave, Heath, and Jamie's rankings. Christian McCaffrey, Austin Ekeler, Bijan. I think Bijan's 3. Barkley's 4. I put that in reverse. McCaffrey, Ekeler, Bijan, Barkley, Taylor. McCaffrey, Ekeler, Bijan, Barkley, Taylor. Dave, give me 30 seconds. Your thoughts on that? Because we're going to spend the rest of the show talking about this basically, but McCaffrey, Ekeler, Bijan, Barkley, Taylor.
I think McCaffrey and Ekeler are basically going to be top 2 for everybody. And you're going to see them picked very, very early in drafts. And I think only the old school thinkers of, well, this guy's a rookie, he's never done it before, will pass on Bijan at 3. I think he's absolutely worth it. Phenomenal talent. There's data to back it up. There's been historical references to him being close to a top 5 type of fantasy running back. I'm a little bit worried about Barkley. I'm not sure he should be consensus top 5. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor. Interesting comments from Robert yesterday about him. And I feel like there's a changing of the guard at the position that we can talk about as we go on. Some of the older running backs are kind of getting pushed down a little bit more and more, and younger running backs getting pushed up.
All right, Dan, your quick take on McCaffrey, Ekeler, Bijan, Barkley, Taylor.
My quick take on that is I have one player in that mix that is not in my top 5, and I will leave that for later in the show as a little teaser.
Is it Saquon? I would be stunned.
It's not Saquon.
Of course it's not.
Oh, man.
It could easily be Saquon. I don't Daniel Jones rank that high.
It could be.
Yeah, it could be.
There's some cases to be made against Saquon.
Yes.
Actually, I'll go ahead and spoil this now. I have a segment in here called The Case for Number One. I try to make the case for number 1. I don't know if I'll get to it, but just in case, I'll ask you guys the case for number 1 for about 8 running backs. Barkley was the only one that I really did not feel like I could make a case for number 1 for him. I don't see him having the same upside, but I will get your take on that. But I do think he's top 5. It's just I don't think he has that like 2,000 total yard.
He's weirdly evolved into more of a safe player in fantasy than what he was when he broke out as a rookie, which was like this could be the potential 1-1.
Oh, all right. Save it for later. Save it for later.
Safe is a weird word to think about with the injuries, but when you think about the volume.
Yeah. Safe is a weird word to think about with running backs.
With running backs, yes. That I agree with.
Okay, so If you want to get your questions read on the air, the best way to do that is with an Apple Podcast review. Please, whether you want to leave us a question or not, we would appreciate a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Now is the time. It's almost July, so we're going to start getting some new listeners beginning next month and into August. And anything you can do to help our show would be great. And what you can do, it's pretty easy. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a nice 5-star review. Tell everybody why you like the show. And if you ask a question as well, we'll try to get those into a mailbag. I'm going to try to save time for that later today as well. News and notes. Okay, it's kind of a big day of headlines, Dave. Dalvin Cook has multiple offers, according to NFL Network's Tom Pelissero. One of them apparently from the Dolphins. Why don't we start with that? Dave, what do you think about Cook to the Dolphins if that happened?
It would ruin the fun of Devon Achane, which we've seen his stock rise based on all the glowing reports from minicamp. And it would really kind of throw that backfield into total chaos because they're already going to use multiple guys. We already know that, but they already have 2 older running backs in Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. Now they'll have 3 in Dalvin Cook. I would imagine that Cook will knock off potentially Mostert off the roster just because he's the oldest guy and maybe the most brittle. We'll see how that goes. I don't know if the Dolphins really need Dalvin Cook. I don't know if anybody really needs Dalvin Cook. That's the problem right now, is that Cook, the name is better than the game, or probably more recognizable than the game. He wasn't that great last year. He had some breakaway runs, but he also struggled a little bit more than we're used to seeing. So bottom line, don't overrate Dalvin Cook no matter where he goes.
Okay. Jonathan Taylor, he's hopeful that he'll be ready. I think maybe he expects to be ready. I'm sorry, Dave, I might be misquoting, but he talked about
hopeful is the word.
Yeah, putting a little bit of doubt about him being ready for the start of training camp, which is still a long ways before the start of the season. But did that strike you as interesting, Dave?
Yes, because the story on Jonathan Taylor last year was that he suffered a high ankle sprain early on. He tried to play through it. He wasn't that great. He missed a lot of time. When he came back, he initially looked good, and then he started to struggle again. The high ankle sprain is an injury. Let's just mention it again, and one that you have to almost downgrade the player on when he gets it. Saquon once had a high ankle sprain, couldn't come back from it and play like the guy that we knew. The fact that he doesn't feel like he's a lock for training camp and didn't do anything in any of the Colts OTAs makes me a little bit nervous. Now that'll go away if the Colts open training camp and he's there and he's sparring, he's doing all the drills. Even if they hold him out of a few team drills, I will feel fine with Jonathan Taylor as long as he's there practicing in some form or fashion. If that doesn't happen, that could be the start of what slides him down my rankings in late July and into August.
Okay, and who are you guys more concerned about right now, Jonathan Taylor or Josh Jacobs, who reportedly could extend his holdout into week 1?
Fantasy-wise, I'm much more concerned with Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, I guess we know who's not in your top 5.
Yes. And I'm a Wisconsin Badger alumni, so it's not like I'm just homering it up. Like we've heard some suggestions from both Dave and Heath throughout previous shows.
Now I'm more interested in finding out who your 5th man is.
It's not all that exciting, but it's not Jonathan Taylor.
I'd like to know who it is. We'll get there.
We've got some friends in the chat today. We got Joey Wright.
Joey.
I'd like to get him on a show soon. Joey, check. I'm going to slide to your DMs. And we got Sia Najad in the CBS.
Sia, what up, Sia?
Cousin Sia.
Nobody's a bigger fan of Frasier than Sia Najad.
No, nobody is. Not even.
No one in the world could like that show the way he likes that TV show.
So I told him that I'm watching every episode. And so far, I think he made it a 1 seed in a 64 sitcom bracket. I told him it's overrated. He overrated it. At best, it's a 4, but it's good. And he said it gets good in season 4. Like gets great. That's
the worst sell for a show I've ever heard. Grind through 3 seasons, and eventually it'll be funny.
I could sort of. I mean, I think The Simpsons falls in a similar boat. I think season 3, The Simpsons starts getting great. Season 4, it starts getting epic. So I'm in the middle of season 3. I'm looking forward to season 4. Back to the news and notes. Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic thinks the Jets believe in rookie running back Israel Abanikanda as an immediate contributor. So we'll keep that in mind.
They need him. If Breece Hall is slow to get going, this is an NFL-ready running back. Could end up being a nice little zero RB target in draft.
And also, not to mention, not only is the NFL ready, he is a system fit, a perfect system fit, which makes a difference when you're trying to see which running back can get involved early.
Brock Purdy remains on track for week 1. All of the reports have been good in terms of Purdy being, ready for week 1, but still a lot to be determined there, I suppose. Nate Atkins of the Indianapolis Star thinks that it's trending toward Anthony Richardson starting week 1, but he's not counting out the possibility of Gardner Minshew starting week 1 for the Colts.
The reports have not been glowing about Anthony Richardson. Apparently, big shocker, the accuracy issues that he had in college are now following him into non-contact passing drills in Indianapolis. We'll see. We will see.
I think it's all right.
There's a chance that offense just doesn't move the ball this year.
Well, okay. You're just spoiling all your arguments.
Well, Dave just brought it up.
But for Pittman, I mean, I honestly could see a 5 to 10 spot jump or dip in the rankings, depending on who his quarterback is. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I feel like everyone wants his quarterback to be Gardner Minshew. I mean, I've seen a lot of that. We're just not really expecting it. And if we are expecting it, we're not expecting it for that long.
Right.
But Dave, how much higher in the rankings would Pittman be for you if Minshew were his quarterback?
I wouldn't change it because eventually it would be Anthony Richardson. So even if Pittman gets off to a good start with Gardner Minshew, what a sentence that is, then he's just, it's not going to be great. I've got him 32nd among wide receivers. He's more talented than wide receiver 32, but he wasn't a dominant red zone threat to begin with. And now we're careening toward Anthony Richardson stealing red zone work away from everybody because he'll run it when they get down there. And if it's not him running it, it's Jonathan Taylor running it. And it's not going to leave a lot for Pittman to score touchdowns. And if the accuracy isn't great from Richardson, that's going to hurt Michael Pittman. By the way, it's been Alec Pierce who's been, I'm not sure Pittman's healthy right now. I'm not sure if he's practicing. Pierce has been working with Richardson, whether Richardson's with the first team or the second team. They've been together on the field every single snap of minicamp. So I think they're trying to get Pierce at least on the same page with Richardson. My guess is that Pittman would be there too if he were healthy.
Okay, moving on here. Evan Lazar of Patriots.com thinks that second-year running back Pierre Strong could be the Patriots' complimentary running back.
Could be.
We're gonna hear a lot. I'm not even going to get into it. We're going to hear about this every freaking day for the next month and a half. So let's just see what happens there.
Do we have 30 seconds to pivot to a dynasty trade that I've turned down?
Yes.
I'm in
I make those decisions. Yes.
I knew you wouldn't like me saying
that. Desperate for quarterback help in a dynasty league. There's a team in the league, and it's best ball, that offered me Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff for 2 first-round picks.
Whoa. Back it up. You got offered Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff for 2 first-round picks in a super flex, obviously?
Yes.
And what are your quarterback situation?
Aaron Rodgers is my best quarterback. I do not have a second best quarterback.
Are you playing to win now?
I think my roster is shaped up where I have to. Like, I've got McCaffrey, Kamara, Pollard. My running backs are amazing.
Those are amazing. Do you have
receivers are old.
But good.
Komet at tight end. I say no. I turned it down. He's going to take it from somebody
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't give 2 first rounds for those guys.
No.
It's a lot.
So I think what I'm going to do is draft CJ Stroud because I'm picking in the middle of round 1 and he's still there.
Yeah, you'll have something.
And then I'll figure out.
You'll have someone who at least playing games. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for the 30-second detour, Schneier. I appreciate that.
I make the decisions. I'm the captain.
All right. There was an article,
be in charge.
An article from ESPN.com about surprising offseason standouts, minicamp standouts for each team. So I'm just going to read some of them. I want some quick reaction. Dan, Treylon Burks was one of them spotlighted.
Love me some Treylon Burks this year. He'll be targeting a lot of my teams. Had issues last camp, not in shape. This is supposed to be a quick take. Just say now he's in shape. Building rapport. Ryan Tannehill wasn't there all last year, which I love. Showed some good signs already last year. Big fan of his.
What round?
That's a good question. When will I would
6?
start? Yeah, I'm thinking. No, that's a little too early. Probably 7 or 8.
7.
I was about to say 6.
It's a 7 pick for me.
6 is a little too early.
Romeo Doubs, Dave. Romeo Doubs.
Listen, I didn't love how he finished last year, but if Jordan Love is connecting with him, you've got to give him credit for that. I've moved him up in my rankings, but I'm still the low guy on him. I have him as a round 10 pick. If the hype continues, he's going to move up into at least round 9, if not round 8.
Is it going to move Christian Watson down for you?
No interest. Sorry, go ahead.
Is it going to move Christian Watson down for you?
If we don't hear any reports about Christian Watson gelling with Jordan Love, and I already think that this offense is going to be slower paced and a little bit more run heavy than we're used to the Packers being, then yeah, that would move Christian Watson down.
Slower pace, more run heavy, and in my opinion, we're going to see a lot of bootleg, quick throws to the tight ends. This is all bad things for Romeo Doubs. I don't see any path to success. I have no interest in Doubs. Don't like him as a talent. Don't like his quarterback situation. Don't like the target potential. I mean, I guess if he's the only one getting targets in camp and it just keeps happening day after day, maybe we can say the rapport is there and I'll come across and finally get in there. But if he's going around 10 or earlier, no shot for me.
All right, Miami running back Devon Achane was on this list of standouts.
Oh, yeah.
We already talked about the impact that Dalvin Cook.
Remember when you said he could only be a returner in the NFL, Adam?
I definitely didn't say he could only be. Can you got to stop. You cannot do this.
Okay.
The thing is, I don't remember what I said, so now I have to.
Okay. I don't remember the exact text, but I wanted to talk him up as a breakout rookie because I love this tape, and you're like,
fine.
You can't do Achane. This guy's going to be a kick returner.
Remember when I said this is supposed to be a quick segment? And then I gave Dave Romeo Doubs. Remember that portion of the show? All right. Some rookie wide receivers to keep an eye on. Michael Wilson for the Cardinals and Puka Nacua for the Rams. They're getting talked up. They've had a good offseason so far. The 49ers are absolutely raving about Brandon Ayuk. Denver rookie running back Jaleel McLaughlin was somebody that was highlighted in this ESPN story. So if Javonte Williams is out, remember the name Jaleel McLaughlin. And Foster Moreau for the Saints now, reuniting with Derek Carr. He's had a good camp and might just be a thorn in the side of Juwan Johnson if you had any interest there. We've gone too long without talking about running backs and without talking to Tara Roberts. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, the rest of the show will be dedicated to the top 5 running backs in fantasy and more, including some emails and Apple Podcast questions. We'll be right back. And we welcome Tara Roberts. It's Tara time. What's up, Tara?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
No speak. Always great to hear from you. What happened to Clemson? What you got? Did you move?
She's got a Clemson on right there.
I've transitioned to a different location right now, but we're still Clemson represented.
Okay, all right.
Always repping Clemson.
But it is great to hear from you. And again, our consensus top 5 is McCaffrey, Ekeler, Bijan, Barkley, and Taylor. If you want to know who's after that, and these are the combination of Dave, Heath, Jamie's rankings. Jacob 6, Pollard 7, Chubb 8, Henry 9, Ramondre Stevenson 10. So, Tara, how about you? Do you have your top 5 handy?
I do. It sounds very similar. It is. It's Christian McCaffrey, Austin Ekeler, Bijan, Saquon, and Jonathan Taylor.
Okay, so that's the same as the consensus here. Dave, what was different, if anything, in your rankings compared to consensus?
I've got Bijan 3rd, Saquon 4th, and currently have Jonathan Taylor 5th because I can't find a better 5th.
I'm confused. I think, let me just double check if Bijan's 3 and Barkley's 4. No, okay, so Barkley is 3 and Bijan is 4. I had it right the first time. So that would be the difference for Dave. Dave has Bijan 3, Barkley 4. The consensus is, because Heath is pretty low on Bijan comparatively. The consensus is Barkley 3, Bijan 4. And Dan, your differences?
So like Dave, I also have Bijan 3 and then Barkley 4, but I don't have Jonathan Taylor in my top 5. I have Josh Jacobs there is in my 5th spot.
Okay. So I asked this question about the quarterbacks, and I'll start with Tara. What was the toughest decision you had to make when ranking your top 5 running backs? And that could be involving those specific 5, or it could be leaving someone out or whatever. Toughest decision you had to make?
Probably a tie between JT at 5. So I'll leave that one for Dan because I'm kind of on board with that one as well. But then also putting Saquon down at 4 and putting Bijan at 3. I've had him, the lowest I had him all throughout the offseason was at 5, I think. And I felt pretty comfortable with it. It was a little bit aggressive back earlier around the draft. But the difficulty with it is then again, we're kind of taking that chance that he, is going to be somebody who is going to have that Saquon Barkley-esque rookie season. And we're asking a lot of him. And, do we sit there and take that chance with an early first round pick, or do we go with the more stable backs when we got a lot of proven options right there, a lot of high upside options as well, if you're dipping down and looking at some guys like Tony Pollard. So taking that risk with Bijan, knowing that this offense could transition a little bit with the investments that they've made at pass catcher and trying to transitioning over to Desmond Ridder as well, that felt the riskiest, but I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Okay, yeah, I wonder where Heath's going to end up on Bijan. I know he's open-minded to moving him up. He has him 8th. That's going to be pretty low amongst the industry. Dan, what was your toughest decision when ranking your top 5 running backs?
Yeah, the toughest decision was definitely keeping Jonathan Taylor out of the top 5. Jonathan Taylor, obviously, in 2021 was the number 1 overall running back, but there's just a bunch of red flags that I don't like in his profile. I think the first one that I don't like is that the Colts were 30th ranked in scoring last year, and I'm just not positive that they're going to get back to any kind of range that will be good for Jonathan Taylor. Because for Jonathan Taylor, we could look at him last year, and he had, so in his 2021 season where he was our RB1 overall, 26 rushing attempts inside the 5. Last year, I know he was injured for some of them, but just 11. And that's the killer for me. I just don't see this offense getting back to a level that can lead to him having fantasy success like a top 5 running back, because he needs scoring opportunities. He needs touchdowns, because I'm not so sure where the passing game work is going to come from. He's evolved a lot as a player, as a receiver, but I don't necessarily think Anthony Richardson is going to focus on targeting him in the passing game. I don't think the Shane Steichen offensive system is good for running backs in the passing game. And then there's one more big flag for me that I'm just going to be worried about with a player like Richardson coming into this offense, and that's, will Richardson take away some of those rushing attempts in the red zone too? Will they run zone read? And will we see a Josh Allen effect there too? And all of those things for me are big red flags from a fantasy standpoint, all situation based for sure. The talent is still there for Taylor, but all these guys are talented that we're talking about in the top 5. I need a better situation.
I'm going to throw out just some numbers here. Look at the top 5 running backs in PPR from the last, let's say, 5 seasons. I'm going to tell you the worst offense they were on. So like the lowest scoring offense of top 5 running backs last 5 seasons. I don't have the actual offenses. I could look them up, but I would tell you 22nd in 2018. RB5 was 22nd. In 2019, we had 2 running backs who were 20th, who were on the 20th or 21st, including, I think that was the year McCaffrey finished as RB1 on an offense that was 20th. 2020, we had an offense that was 23rd, that RB4. In 2021, RB3 was on the 21st ranked offense. And then the best case for a running back to be on a terrible offense and finish in the top 5.
The Barkley 2018.
Derrick Henry this past year. He was RB4 on the 28th. It's the lowest one I've seen.
Where was the Barkley 2018? I feel like that offense couldn't have been high scoring, that Giants offense. Maybe
so he may have been 2018 or 19.
2018, his rookie season, because they had a bad offense that year.
I have maybe 22nd. I think they were 22nd.
Even assuming what you just said, though, Adam, that would still require a pretty big jump from the Colts offense this year, correct? I mean, they were 30th in scoring. I know there's expectation Anthony Richardson will help that offense, but like Dave said, it's early part of OTAs. He can't even keep the pass game on schedule at all. So it's like, I don't know if that's a guarantee.
Yeah, I think the Giants were 16th in scoring that year, believe it.
Wow.
Something like that. All right. So Dave, how about you? What was the toughest decision you had to make?
I had two tough decisions. So I'm cheating and I'm giving you 2. The first one was making McCaffrey number 1 over Ekeler when Eckler's been so productive for the Chargers over the last 2 seasons, over 20 PPR points per game. Just seems like he's a little safer in that regard compared to Christian McCaffrey, but I couldn't do it because McCaffrey's upside is better than 20 PPR points per game. It's like 24 or 25 PPR points per game. So I didn't do that. Plus, Ekeler was number 1 last year. It's very hard to repeat year over year as RB1. And then the other one was what we've talked about. Where does Bijan rank compared to Barkley, compared to Taylor? Where do Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb, where do those guys rank compared to them? The case can be made for a lot of running backs to be top 5.
The toughest decision that if I had rankings would be leaving Henry out, and he's like 8th in consensus rankings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's talk about Derrick Henry, and then I do want to get back to McCaffrey versus Ekeler. But Tara, 2 things that I'd be worried about with Henry. I think one of them everyone's worried about, and that's his age.
Yep.
He's going to
29.
turn 30 in January, before the end of the regular season. So it's to age 29 season, but he's an old 29. And then people may not be aware, but I looked at his advanced metrics each of the last 4 years. And over the and like the first 2 years of that span, he was clearly elite. He was elite in almost everything. He has not even been close the last couple of years. So there is, I feel safe saying there is decline there, unless Skoronski comes and changes this offensive line dramatically or something as a rookie. I mean, I think there is decline there. I wonder how you feel about that. But you don't have Derrick Henry in your top 5. And was that difficult for you, Tara?
It was, because I am very much so pro Derrick Henry. I'll keep drafting him until the wheels fall off, because at this point, I mean, you just kind of see that he's built a bit different than other guys, and you can't really project when that drop off is going to come. But like you said, there's a clear decline. We can look at yards per carry, his efficiency, and see that, things are getting a little bit more difficult for him. But what keeps me, pushing Derrick Henry up towards the top, and why I'm still comfortable with him as a top 10 pick, a top 10 at running back pick, is that regardless, the volume is still going to be there. We don't have any major adjustments in the offense. We don't see anything, unless even if they signed DeAndre Hopkins, again, that's not going to signal a massive change in philosophy. They would just have a slightly better receiving core, significantly better receiving core than they had last year, just to be more reliable. But we're not going to see this offense all of a sudden turn into a gunslinging offense. I think the volume will still be there. So even if we're getting him in the low 4 yards per carry, the volume will still be there. They're not going to cut that off. This is not going to transition into somebody else, Tajay Spears cutting into his workload. We've still got the goal line rushes. We've still got a little bit of passing upside. We got a little bit of that helping out last season. And maybe if they don't get DeAndre Hopkins, we see that continue as well. So I think all of the measurables are there in terms of statistics to kind of make up for the fact that there is a little bit of a decline happening year over year. The volume will still be there, so he's still a comfortable pick for me.
It's a great point about the receiving work too, because each of the last 2 seasons,
career highs last year.
Yeah.
Career high last year, but I think he was actually catching more passes per game the year before that. He just played 8 games.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about the last 2 years, 35, 40 catch kind of guy. I can't guarantee that, but I think more than, 19, which was used to be like great for him.
Yeah.
Dave. Dan, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick note on what Tara said that I think was a great point about the philosophy staying the same. Over the past 5 seasons with the Titans, despite them changing coordinators and having different people in there, with Mike Vrabel there, they've been top 3 in neutral run rate over expected in all 5 seasons. 2 of the seasons they were first, or 2021 they were first. 2 of the seasons they were second. So this is a team that's going to run the football. We have 5 years worth of data showing they're going to run it over expected.
There's a comment here in the chat that I have no idea if this is true or not even close to true. When Derrick Henry, when he retires, he will have ran across the entire planet based on career yards and attempts from high school to the pros.
Who's tracking this, and how is this?
It could be true. I don't know.
I believe it.
I believe it. Deb.
All right, Dave, you mentioned McCaffrey versus Ekeler. All right, yeah. I mean, you briefly got into it. Why don't you expand a little bit there? And my question would be, how afraid are you of Elijah Mitchell in this debate?
I'm not. With the 49ers, McCaffrey averaged 21.9 PPR points per game. He was one of the most explosive running backs last year, including with San Francisco. He was their rushing leader despite playing, I think it was 11 games with San Francisco in the regular season. He averaged 14.5 attempts per game. That would have come out to 245 attempts over 17 games. That doesn't account for any of his catches. Of course, his catches would have been great if he had been in San Francisco, and I think they will be. He's also been very consistent, which I think is what makes him an easy 101 if you were so inclined. In his last 59 games, this is his past 5 seasons, he's given you at least 15 PPR points 80% of the time, 47 of 59 games. If you're looking for 20 PPR points, he's done that 66% of the time. 2/3 of his games, Adam, 39 of 59 games, he's given you at least 20 PPR points. And those percentages I just gave you, they're down from this time last year. So I don't think that means that he's a descending player. I think it just means that he kind of had a little bit of a rocky season. And now that he's in San Francisco, he could really see another great, efficient campaign where he can hit that 25 PPR point per game mark. Basically, you're getting like low-end QB1 production, maybe even middle-end QB1 production out of Christian McCaffrey, he's irresistible to me as the number 1 overall pick.
Tara, your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually think the whole CMC with Elijah Mitchell is kind of blown out of proportion. I looked at the games, those specific games with the two of them combined. And really it's only 3 because you have to throw out that final game where Elijah Mitchell came back because that was against Arizona. CMC wasn't really utilized. The snaps were significantly down just because obviously they blew them out and that game didn't really matter. So if we're really looking at those 3 games in the middle of the season, shortly after he arrived, are we really drawing such aggressive conclusions against CMC as the RB1 overall off of 3 games? And if you kind of look at them, those might have just been 3 really weird games because those games were literally the worst games of the entire season, not just because of him having to split work with Elijah Mitchell. They were the lowest yards per carry for him in the entire season. He averaged less than 3 yards per carry. Very weird. So I kind of wonder if maybe there was just oddly something else going on that just maybe kind of made them pull back a little from McCaffrey over that time period. Because when you combine that with the low yards per carry and kind of looking at that and saying, if he had been his usual Christian McCaffrey and wasn't struggling with the yardage, the stats would have been very different. So I think there might have been just something where those 3 games in particular might have just been independently off. And I don't know if we want to really discount Christian McCaffrey just because of that.
And if you look at even those games in that stretch, I believe there were times where he popped up on the injury report. I'm trying to remember what it was that he was dealing with. I thought it was calf, but I'm not positive. I have to look at that at another point. But even assuming that Elijah Mitchell is going to play a role in this offense, which he will, because obviously this is not a workhorse type of style system with Shanahan, does it really matter? Because we're focusing so much on Mitchell's side of it. But what about this? In 10 starts with the 49ers after the trade, he averaged over 20 touches per game, 20.1 touches per game. That's more than almost every run. That's a top 5 running back type of touch percentage right there, even with Mitchell in for some of those. And the main thing with McCaffrey for me, it's like we can focus on how much of the touches he's going to get, or we could focus on the fact that he's still getting a ton of targets. And we know that historically, at least 1 target in the passing game for a running back is worth about 2.7 carries in terms of expected points back in PPR leagues, which is extremely important. And even with all of the weapons healthy, McCaffrey was 3rd on the target totem pole, which was really good with 26 in 5 games when everyone was healthy. And in addition to that, he scored 13 touchdowns in 14 games with San Francisco. So we should also focus on the fact that he's in one of the best offenses in the NFL, which is extremely important for fantasy. It's a system that doesn't fail. And as Adam said, Brock Purdy might be ready for the week 1 of the season. So that's somebody who can keep the offense on track. We've seen McCaffrey score points with Purdy running the offense. So I think more of the focus needs to be on the other factors here.
Well, I right now am on Ekeler, number 1, McCaffrey 2. Reluctantly, it's not set in stone, but I'll just say, okay, it's not that I'm killing McCaffrey here. We're talking about the difference between him being RB1 and RB2, right? So that I'm not burying him or anything like that. I think I have a 6-game sample. Tara, you said 3. You're not counting week 18. I am counting week 18 plus the 2 playoff games that they both played together. And I don't necessarily look at McCaffrey only had 5 more carries than Elijah Mitchell. And Dave, when you gave all those stats about McCaffrey and what he did with San Francisco and his pace and all that, it's 245 carries and 80 catches and 15 touchdowns or something like that, but total touchdowns. But the numbers, I mean, the fantasy production, you're talking about like almost 10 per game, 9 per game or something like that with and without Elijah Mitchell. So, they're skewed a little bit. I think the bigger number to me is in the first half of those 6 games, like the first and second quarter of those 6 games, McCaffrey had 37 carries and Elijah Mitchell had 17 carries. And that feels like somewhat of a realistic split, about 68% of the carries for McCaffrey. And I think if that happens, that's the worst split, I think, of any first-round running back. Maybe any first or second round running back, it's low. He'll compensate with catches, but is he a 120 catch guy like he used to be? Or is he an 80 catch guy like he was on pace for? Let's not forget Deebo Samuel missed some time when Christian McCaffrey was with the 49ers, and he's a factor with 3 or 4 carries per game, I would expect. But he also was a short area target, and he's determined to have a bigger role. And let's not forget that somehow Christian McCaffrey is the only 49ers running back that hasn't gotten hurt in the last 5 years, but he gets hurt all the time, and 49ers running backs get hurt all the time. And let's not forget, Austin Ekeler has been a top 3 running back per game 2 straight years and has, in my opinion, pretty much no significant competition. So I am statistically on Ekeler over McCaffrey. I say, am I overthinking this? He's Christian McCaffrey. He's a better player on an amazing offense. Maybe I'm just penalizing him too much.
You made some great points there, Adam. I don't think you're penalizing him too much, and especially the last point you made. I just think it's so funny in the fantasy football community how we view these players and how much of going into last year's draft, anyone who put McCaffrey as the running back 1 or the first pick overall, you'd see comments in the YouTube or wherever like, how could you draft this guy? He's so injury prone. He's going to be out by week 4. And now like no one's talking about this anymore. All of a sudden, this is not a factor in play. It was the biggest factor for people. And now it's nothing. And this guy missed, like you said, I mean, you mentioned the injuries, 23 games combined in 2020 and 2021. In 2 seasons, he missed 23 of 32 games. But of course, now it's nothing. And last year was everything. It's just so crazy to me. The injury prone thing is just like so overblown. And so we don't have good data on it. One day we'll be able to figure it out better, I think, hopefully. But right now, I feel like it's mostly based on recency bias.
All right. Well, Twitter poll right now. Who's your number 1 running back in PPR? I just put this up a few minutes ago at 180 votes. McCaffrey, 69.4%. Ekeler, 16%. Bijan, about 11%. Other 4. I said, who's your number 1 running back? I can't believe this.
Other.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to our next topic here. Which top 5 running back, Dave, has the most upside? This could be an easy one. So
McCaffrey.
Everyone think that?
You know what? I'm gonna take a wild card here. I'm gonna go with Bijan Robinson. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Bijan Robinson. Might as well make the case for him right now is why I think he could be the RB1 over some of these guys potentially. So Bijan Robinson's entering the NFL right now is, in my opinion, the best running back prospect that I've ever watched on film, and that includes Saquon Barkley. The reason I think Bijan is a better prospect than Saquon Barkley is because I think Bijan Robinson is a better mental processor than Saquon Barkley was. I think he does a much better job in between the tackles. I think he does a much better job setting up his blocks. I think he does a much better job of creating yards independent of his offensive line. But in addition to that, he has a really good system that he's coming into. This Falcons team had the highest rushing grade of all NFL teams according to Pro Football Focus. They did it really without a big name offensive line. They have one amazing player in Chris Lindstrom. I think he's the best guard in the NFL right now in the run game. But outside of him, they just did it with scheme, and that scheme's coming back. In addition to that, we're talking about a prospect who had more forced missed tackles than PFF has ever charted last year with 102. He had a breakout. His breakout age was great. He was amazing as a freshman. 6.3 yards per carry throughout his career. 39% forced missed tackle rate. 22 carries of 15+ yards. And he can work in the passing game. It's not just like he's a guy like some of these guys who make progress in the NFL as a receiver, like Barkley or Jonathan Taylor. To me, when I watch them play, I feel like they're just running flare routes or catching screens or running very basic routes. With Bijan Robinson, it's like a Christian McCaffrey type receiving running back. He's going to be flexed out. He's going to be used on arrow routes, Texas routes, wheel routes. He's going to be used all different ways on the vertical plane, horizontal, and it's going to be a mismatch. And if Arthur Smith, can figure this out, which I think he can, it's going to be big stuff. And also 1,071 yards after contact last year at a 1,575. I mean, this is just a dude who doesn't need anything around him. So I just feel like he's coming into a great system here. He's the best. I think he's the best talent in the NFL right now at running back, to be completely honest, including McCaffrey, including Barkley, including whoever, based on age, based on lack of tread on his tires, all of those things. So to me, I think there is a case for him to be the RB1 overall, because Barkley wasn't too far away in 2018. Was he RB1? He wasn't in 2018, right?
I think he was RB2.
He was 2, right. But Barkley was close.
They were basically tied in PPR.
Okay, in 2018? Okay, right. And so I think we've already seen a case where it's come close, and I think Bijan has a chance to do it.
All right, Tara, who has the most upside?
Yeah, it's got to be Bijan. Again, I know we've been burned in the past off of rookie running backs that we've taken in the first round and turning it into a nightmare. But what kind of pushes me over, Bijan, the prospect is just on another level. But what pushes me over the edge is just the landing spot for the Falcons being the little perfect situation for him. With Atlanta, we know, rushing attempts first, rushing yards. We talked about them being, fantastic as a rushing offense, high grades, the touchdowns were there, the yards per attempt were there. There was no flaw in their run game with literally, anyone and everyone that they inserted into the lineup to run. And I know the argument that a lot of people have is kind of the worry that they're going to, and I think I mentioned this earlier, the worry they're going to increase pass volume. We're going to see Kyle Pitts and Drake London together again, Desmond Ridder with more experience under him. We did see a little uptick as well in pass volume. But I think kind of what we have to consider with that is that, there's probably going to be an increase in game pace. They ran the 7th least plays in 2022. They're going to increase pass volume, increase the pace of game, and the run game doesn't have to be reduced. So if we're looking at that Atlanta Falcons system, knowing exactly what Arthur Smith wants to do, knowing that this is going to stick, and knowing that Bijan is coming in there as this massive investment. This is not going to be a 50-50 split with Tyler Algier, although I still love him as a high-end handcuff. But Bijan fell literally into the perfect situation. Combine that with the talent, the upside is massive. So I'm willing to risk a high pick on him just because the likelihood is a lot higher than a lot of these rookies that we've seen in the past.
All right. I was surprised. 2 Bijans there and a McCaffrey for who has the most upside and among the top 5. Which top 5 running back has the most downside, Dave?
The running back with the most downside, based on who we're talking, it's got to be Jonathan Taylor.
You're not going to get an argument from Dan. Why do you say that, Dave?
Well, you're asking me or you're asking Dan?
You, Dave.
We know that the offense is in the first year of a new playbook, first year rookie quarterback. Don't know how that's going to work out. We don't know what the offensive line is going to look like. Taylor's coming off of a terrible year where he wasn't his efficient self. The argument for Jonathan Taylor has always been the dude has 2,000 total yard potential. He's got to run like a world beater again, and he's got to do it with a rookie quarterback in an offense that's probably going to have some mistakes in it, and an offensive line that's not as good as it was when he did run for over 2,000 total yards, or did have 2,000 total yards 2 seasons ago. Worried about touchdowns getting eaten up by Anthony Richardson. Worried about the offense playing from behind a little bit more often than we'd like. And I get nervous about Jonathan Taylor being a mega stud.
Okay. Dan, I think you're going to agree. He has the most downside, but he's not in your top 5. So of your top 5 running backs, which includes Josh Jacobs and the other 4, who has the most downside?
It would have to be Josh Jacobs for me. I mean, he's 5th in my rankings for a reason. There are good things about Josh Jacobs. I like that he's just 25 years old. The rest of these guys are kind of bordering on the fall off age of 27-ish. I like that he had 23.1 touches per game last year, which is, to me, it's all about volume. I like no more Darren Waller. Maybe that helps him in the pass game, but I still think back to this and I'm like, I know Derek Carr's not great, but in my mind, Jimmy Garoppolo is a terrible NFL quarterback. I'm sticking with that take for the rest of my life. I feel like the Brock Purdy era proved it to me more than ever so, that literally it's all system-based there in San Francisco. And so I think Jimmy out of that system, yes, he gets Josh McDaniels, which helps because that system, he's shown some success in, I guess, a 4-game stretch, if you want to call it that, with a really good offense around him. But I have real big concerns about the offense with Jimmy Garoppolo. So that, to me, scares me a bit with Jacobs, who had 12 touchdowns last year. Could we see that number fall back to 7-8 range? Possibly. So he would be my biggest concern.
All right, how about you, Tara? Who is the most downside in the top 5?
It's JT. Technically, there is the risk that Saquon could sit a little bit, so that is a massive downside. So maybe there's the argument there, but then again, that's not statistic-wise. That's purely if he decides he wants to make a statement and wants to, sit out a portion of the season or a few games at least. But it's JT for sure. And again, I agree with Dave. It's for him to hit RB1 overall again. Way too many things have to line up in a situation that is strictly brand new. There's a lot of things that can work out for him. We see, if things maybe can work out with Anthony Richardson, maybe he can, find his accuracy, open things up a little bit, threat to run as well. Maybe that opens things up and the offense moves a little bit better than we expect. And those rushing touchdowns can be there. But if they're not, he is so reliant on those. And if Anthony Richardson steals them, you get a little bit concerned that he's just the riskiest one. When you look at a guy like Saquon, I think Adam, as you talked about, he's the one that we just can't really see as the overall RB1 just because of the situation that he's in. But at least he's a very stable, low risk option if he actually gets out there and plays. We know he's an RB1 just based off, who he is, statistics, and track record. With JT, it's a little bit concerning because there's so many things that could go wrong for him.
Yeah. I hope I'm not selling Barkley short by saying he doesn't have number 1 running back potential. I don't see him having like 300 plus carries. I don't see him having more than maybe 55, 60 catches. He's not gonna have a Josh Jacobs like workload or a Derrick Henry like workload. I don't know.
No, you're not selling him short, Adam. To even get to that level, he'd have to get close back to 2018, where he had 9 runs of 40+ yards. He had 2 runs of 40+ yards last year. Right. 2 runs. He's had multiple lower body injuries. He had 2 runs of 40+ yards. He averaged 3.37 yards after contact per attempt in 2018, and 2019 was not too far off. Last year was 2.73, and that was supposed to be back to Saquon Barkley. So in my mind, he really isn't the same back. It's not his fault. I don't really think many backs carry that well through multiple lower body injuries, including tears, and then into their late 20s. But I just don't think he's that explosive runner, as explosive as a runner as he was, I guess. And that's what you need to be to be a fantasy RB1 overall.
His schedule's a nightmare too.
And that's another thing. You look at Dave's PSOS, like his strength of schedule rankings, 32 for Barkley.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dead last. You have to respect the Eagles, Cowboys, Commanders.
Who's going to run against those defensive lines?
Right. Mm-hmm. It's going to be hard for him. Now, he had some decent games against them last year, but
Cowboys.
He's got the NFC West on top of that. He's got the AFC East on top of that. Those are going to be some tough defenses. Mm-hmm. Plus the Saints, plus Green Bay.
Yep.
It is an ugly schedule for all Giants. You've got to keep that in mind when you draft any Giant this year.
Yep.
And then add on top of that, people kind of laugh about it and make jokes, but Daniel Jones, again, he's the one on the list where you're looking at it other than Anthony Richardson, has the most upside in terms of rushing production. I don't see where that really decreases for him. So, Saquon does unfortunately have that to compete with as well.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said I can't see him getting 300 carries. He had 295 carries in 16 games last year. So he did have a pretty big workload. I don't really think of him holding. I don't know. Right. Yeah, it was. I don't know. How many did Josh Jacobs have last year?
I think that number goes down if they re-sign him, though, to a multi-year deal.
Well, it's not a huge knock against him. It's just, I don't think he's going to be basically like Derrick Henry. The case for him is volume. He's going to get every goal line touchdown, basically. It's not going to be quite the same. Yeah, Josh Jacobs had 340 carries. Derrick Henry had 349 in one fewer game. He's not going to be there, Saquon Barkley, but he could certainly be top 5 in carries. All right, let's take a break and come back with your emails at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. And welcome back, everybody. We're finishing up here. We discussed our running back, so let's get to your questions. Email address, again, is fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. And Danny from Frisco, Texas says, does anyone on the podcast feel that the Tua concussion talk is a little familiar? I remember a few years ago when everyone was so sure that Brandon Cooks was one concussion away from ending his career, and it was inevitable and ended up being underrated. Now no one brings it up anymore. Is everyone too focused on concussions with Tua? Love to hear your thoughts. Tara, you're not on the podcast, but you can tell us if we were making too big of a deal of it. I think we've tried to put it in perspective, honestly, but your thoughts on Tua and the concussions?
I mean, I think the concern was natural, really, just for him as the player. But yeah, putting too much on it in terms of downgrading, like people making that a concern for Tyreek Hill and pushing him down a little bit and saying that, he doesn't have that same upside because of the possibility of the concussion issue with Tua, then yeah, I think we're putting a little bit too much on it from a fantasy perspective, not from the concern for Tua perspective.
The Dolphins have said that the doctors told them that he is at no more risk than any other player to have a concussion. I mean, I guess you could argue that he plays quarterback and that makes him more risky, but I don't know if that's true or not. But
I don't know. Yeah.
Medically, according to the Dolphins, he is not a concussion risk any more so than any other player. This is from David in Chattanooga. Dan, you better get this greeting. You better get this greeting. Dear Harry, Lloyd, Seabass, and Billy from 4C.
Seabass. I know the Seabass one. Harry, Lloyd, Billy from 4C. Seabass. Kick his ass, Seabass. It's like that, right? That's what it is.
What is that?
What is that, though? Why do I know that if I don't know the movie? Kick his ass, Seabass. That's all I know. That's all that comes to mind here.
Dave, are you serious?
Yeah, this is embarrassing.
Tara, it doesn't seem like Tara knows either. I'm just going to be honest. Looking at her face, it does not seem like Tara knows either. Okay.
You know what? Tara doesn't.
And maybe you're just showing your age here, Adam.
No, Tara doesn't criticize my pop culture takes all the time. You do. So you not knowing Dumb and Dumber. How do you not know Harry and Lloyd?
Yeah, I've never seen Dumb and Dumber.
Oh,
me either.
Yeah.
Wow, the two of you. All right, which of these 3 wide receivers, which are all presumably the second best wide receivers on their team, is capable of making the leap to best wide receiver on their teams, if any of them? And how do you have them ranked currently? And the three that David from Chattanooga gives are, David, you should have said you were from Aspen. T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle. Higgins, Devontae, Jalen Waddle. Dave, how do you have them ranked? And do any of them have the chance to be the number one guy on their team?
I think it'll take an injury for any of them to be the number one guy on their team, but those teams throw so well and or are so efficient doing so that you don't mind taking a number two from those squads. I've got Waddle ranked the highest, followed by Devontae, followed by T. Higgins, and love them all in that low end number one, high end number two wide receiver range.
Anyone? Comment from the chat. Dan acts like
did you pull this up or did Thomas pull this
that's Schaefer all the way.
Okay.
That's good. That's
Schaefer's
good.
playing the role of Azer, cherry picking the comments that make Azer look good and making me look bad. I understand.
Tara, how do you rank Higgins, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle?
For me, it is Waddle, Higgins, Devonta Smith. But oddly enough, the one that I do think realistically has the better chance to be the wide receiver one on his team is Devonta Smith. I mean, I love all of them. There's just no reality in which Higgins, overcomes Chase. Just not going to happen. And we're talking Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. But realistically, while, AJ Brown is obviously clearly ranked higher for me, when you look at their statistics and the way that they were utilized in the back half of that season, once things really started to gel, Devonta Smith is the one that realistically could teeter over the edge.
Devontae Smith is my pick as well, and I think it's the clear-cut pick here, and I'm with Tara. You look at those back-end numbers when that offense started to click, and not just that. You look at these guys as prospects, right? Like Devontae Smith was one of the most elite prospects I think I've ever covered and studied, and he's showing it at the NFL level. He's high-pointing catches, which people said he wasn't going to be able to do, and making plays away from his frame. He's doing basically everything you want. He wins at all three levels, in addition to being that speedster guy. So it's close for me, but I kind of like Devontae Smith closer to AJ Brown than I think anyone in the industry. I have them ranked closer than anyone I've seen.
I don't have Smith ranked the highest. I mean, I think there's two questions here. Smith,
well, yeah, right. I have Waddle ranked higher because of the system they play in. But
right. Smith, Smith seems like the likeliest because I believe it started as soon as Dallas Goedert got hurt. It seemed like they started throwing to Devontae Smith more, and then they never stopped. But I believe from the moment Goddard got hurt, which was like week 9, till through the end of the season, including the playoffs, I think Devontae Smith had more targets than AJ Brown, but very, very close. It was really an even split. All right, last question here is from Zachary. Dave, Zachary is from the land of sky blue waters.
I believe that would be Coral Gables, Florida.
Okay.
What? Southern suns and sky blue waters smile upon you, alma mater. You want to hear the rest of the University of Miami alma mater song?
Oh, that's why you
mistress of this fruitful land.
So much worse
I
than
went
Wisconsin.
all in last year, but late injuries derailed my playoffs run. Now I have a talented team with suspension, age, and injury concerns, so I'm thinking of doing a rebuild, but I don't have first rounders in 2023 or 2024. What do you think of this trade offer I received? If I do this trade, I will plan on making more trades. It's a Superflex PPR 12-team league. I give up Lamar Jackson and Joe Mixon. Remember, he wants thinking about a rebuild here, and doesn't have any first or second round picks in 2023 or 2024. He gives up Lamar Jackson and Joe Mixon. He gets Tua, Kenny Pickett, AJ Dillon, and a first round pick in 2023, 1.7.
God, I hate this trade.
That's not good.
Me too.
God, I hate this trade. I'm sorry, my man. If you want to rebuild, don't do it without Lamar, first of all, who just signed a mega contract. Don't do it without him. Trade your Mixons, trade your guys like that, but don't do it without Lamar. And 107, come on.
Okay. Tara, thank you for hopping on.
Always.
Yeah. That is it for FFT.
Yeah, isn't it obvious that they went to the worst school of us three? I mean, like, come on.
Yeah,
Clemson.
How dare
Clemson sounds
you.
cool. I would have
the
loved
alma
to go to
mater
Clemson.
sounds like my high school. Alma
Right?
mater.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the worst alma mater I've ever heard.
Oh, you had a pool. You had a pool.
Let's
on
hear
your
you sing your alma mater, Dan Schneider. Let's go. Do you even know it?
Varsity.
I feel like I'm in temple.
Hoorah, Wisconsin. Pray
Am I
to
supposed to
All
thee
right, and
we
Tara, let's
say-
hear
we
Clemson.
say-
Stop. Tara, let's hear Clemson's alma mater.
You guys don't want to hear me sing.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Don't
Best of
pressure
us.
her,
You're
Dan.
easily going to be the best of these four. These three that just sang.
Yeah.
It's very true. Wait, no, but you had a swimming pool in the middle of your campus, right? Oh, like from this, you would sit at
wow.
Sparrows and look out at the swimming pool and then go swimming, like in the middle of the day. That was your campus, right, Dave or Dan?
It was my
that's your
campus.
campus? No, but when we went to hang out at night and have
Sparrow.
parties, we didn't have to go to live in like the clubs.
No, we
had
didn't either.
Okay.
We didn't either.
Yeah. Okay,
know Adam.
I was booking those clubs back in the day.
All right, everybody. Great show. Thank you very much. Tomorrow we'll talk about our top 5 wide receivers. Jake Seeley will be joining the program. We'll talk to you then on Fantasy Football Today.